Good evening, I'm Diana Sky and you're watching World News Tonight live from Warsaw. On this episode, we focus on the mounting anti-government protests taking place in Belgrade as students and protesters push for political change. Now we'll have more on that in just a moment, but first, let's take a look at tonight's headlines. Kyiv's government building is hit in Russia's largest strike yet. And Pussy Riot activist is freed in Poland. And the blood moon dazzles skywatchers worldwide. And we begin in Serbia, where protests are mounting in the streets of Belgrade. Students and their supporters continue to demand political reforms and new elections and remain undeterred by police crackdowns and President Aleksandar Vučić's harsh rhetoric. And after 10 months of unrest, the movement shows no signs of slowing down. Natalia Komarov reports.
On Monday, Serbian students held yet another anti-government rally in Belgrade. And they have increasingly more reasons to protest, as the recent demonstrations were met with a brutal police crackdown.
They were completely peaceful until in front of, and we see the pictures here, in front of the Faculty of Philosophy, skirmishes began, and there is suspicion that provocateurs did attack the police first.
Many witnesses of Friday's demonstration in Novi Sad believe violent incidents were sparked by provocateurs.
The people that come together for these protests, these are people who don't wear any kind of masks. People show their faces openly. And if you have a few individuals there who have, either caps or hoods, and they have masks that, cover their faces so that only you can see the slit of their eyes, these are not normal protesters.
Later, Serbian President Aleksandar Vučić vowed to make more arrests.
In the coming days and weeks, you will be able to see not only the changes within the system, but also to see those who committed criminal acts and violated the law being held responsible for that. This is not a threat, but a promise.
According to Vučić, the protesters are mainly foreign agents and criminals tasked with destabilizing the country.
You are helped by Europeans, come.
This is just the latest escalation in a situation which has been going on for over 10 months. Serbians are demanding new elections and profound political reforms, and President Vučić refuses to step down.
Right now, we are trying to convince our government that we need elections to end this political crisis we are facing every day.
The students and their supporters are not giving up. On the contrary, they are preparing for an eventful autumn.
We've come too far to stop now, so we shall persevere, and I'm sure that in the end we will be successful to try to reconstitute democracy in Serbia.
For TVP World, Natalia Komarov.
Russia launches its biggest assault on Kyiv since the beginning of the war, striking the government's cabinet building. A drone crashes in Poland near the Belarus border, and U.S. President Donald Trump says European leaders are heading to Washington for talks on Ukraine, though no official confirmations from EU capitals. Randy Potts gives us the latest in this next report.
In the wake of more Russian attacks on Ukraine, Trump says there will be more meetings to discuss a peace plan.
Certain European leaders are coming over to our country on Monday or Tuesday, and individually. And I think we're going to get that settled. I think we're going to get it settled. We have to.
It is still unclear which leaders might be traveling to Washington, as no EU leaders have made any announcements. Polish Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski's office in Warsaw says Poland has not heard anything regarding a possible meeting. Over the weekend, a drone with Cyrillic markings fell near Poland's border with Belarus.
At the moment, we are also securing video surveillance, which may allow us to examine the trajectory of this drone to determine where it came from.
Every object that enters Polish airspace is monitored. Will such situations happen in a frontline country? Of course, because several thousand drones are shot down in Ukraine every day. Does this mean we're safe? Yes, and our security services are already investigating the incident.
Over the same weekend, Kyiv experienced its worst attack since the full-scale invasion began in 2022. On Sunday, Ukrainian Prime Minister Yulia Sviridenko made a video from her office.
I am now in the building of the Ukrainian government. For the first time since the start of full-scale war, the enemy struck this government building in the very center of Kyiv. You can see the consequences of the enemy's attack. The fire spanning 800 square meters has been put out. Our rescuers continue to work here. It looks like Russia is not ready and is not seeking peace. It is not ready for negotiations. Every new attack gets even more outrageous than the previous ones. And the fact that the debris of an intercepted Shahed drone or even a drone itself hit the government quarter is another proof that Russia does not plan to stop it.
In response to Russia's stepped-up attacks, Ukraine has knocked out some 20% of Russia's oil refining capacity in the month of August alone. Gasoline prices have reached record highs in Russia amid mounting reports of fuel shortages.
Russia cannot refine enough oil, hence it cannot produce enough gasoline. And we have already seen something we haven't seen since the 90s in Russia.
In a sign of consumer pessimism, since the beginning of summer 2025, Russians have been taking hundreds of billions of rubles out of Russian banks. September 2025 has already seen record withdrawals. Ukraine has recently taken aim at the Druzhba pipeline, one of the most important routes for Russian oil exports to Europe, supplying both Hungary and Slovakia with energy supplies. Despite the attack, authorities in Hungary and Slovakia confirmed that supplies were not affected. In an apparent pun, when asked about how this news of a strike on the Druzhba pipeline might affect relations with Hungary, Zelensky used the word Druzhba while smirking. Druzhba can mean both friendship and be a reference to the Druzhba pipeline.
We have always supported friendship between Ukraine and Hungary, and now the existence of friendship depends on Hungary's position.
With these attacks, European leaders are attempting to move forward with more sanctions, specifically looking at ways to use portions of frozen Russian bank accounts to help Ukraine. Some experts are now saying there is a legal basis for this.
When an aggressor country has committed breaches of international law that are so egregious that it affects the entire global community, third-party countries can take those countermeasures on behalf of the victim country without being directly at war with the aggressor itself.
When asked on Sunday if he was ready to impose more sanctions on Russia, President Trump simply responded,
"Are you ready to move to the second phase of sanctions against Russia or punishing Putin?" How was your call?
For TVP World, Randy Potts.
Aisoltan Niyazova, an activist from the anti-Putin feminist group Pussy Riot, has been released from custody in Poland. Now, she was detained Saturday at the border with Lithuania over an Interpol red notice requested by Turkmen authorities. Anastasia Yanchenko gives us the details in this next report.
This is Aisoltan Niyazova, a member of the Russian feminist and anti-authoritarian punk group Pussy Riot. After 2 days in custody, she was released from a pre-trial detention center in Suwałki in northeastern Poland.
I had to wait 2 days. In moral terms, I understood that Poland wouldn't extradite me to Turkmenistan. This morning they were getting ready to take me to the prison in Białystok, but the prosecutor released me immediately.
Polish border guards detained Niyazova as she was entering from Lithuania. Officials said her name had appeared on an Interpol red notice after Turkmen authorities requested her extradition. Turkmen authorities accused Niyazova of involvement in the 2002 theft of $40 million from the country's central bank. Pussy Riot member Lucy Stein said the warrant against Niyazova is politically motivated.
They have been putting this person through this for years just because she is the daughter of Turkmen opposition figure killed in prison.
In 2022, Niyazova was detained in Croatia and Slovenia for the same reason, but was released both times. Still, Interpol has kept her on the red notice list, even though human rights NGOs accuse Turkmenistan of repression and human rights violations.
Most countries in the world and most Interpol members are far from democratic. But it's very difficult to make a decision to, for example, exclude Turkmenistan, Russia or Belarus from Interpol, because there is still a certain percentage of real criminals who are tracked, caught and often extradited through this channel.
However, according to lawyers, when the extradition request comes from an oppressive regime with a record of widespread human rights violations, such arrests in democratic countries often end with release.
For the European Union, extraditing anyone to Turkmenistan is below any standard, because we understand that Turkmen prisons are even worse than Russian ones. It's a clear case of torture and inhumane treatment.
Niyazova was previously extradited to Russia in 2011, where she spent 6 years in a penal colony on charges of embezzling $20 million.
She was extradited from Switzerland, where she spent a year in prison. But later, Switzerland admitted its mistake. It was an unjust and again fabricated case, as often happens in Russia.
Niyazova has already appealed to be taken off the red notice list, but her name has yet to be removed. Pussy Riot says it plans to file another request to have Niyazova taken off the list.
Romania has arrested a former top Moldovan intelligence official accused of having disclosed secret information to the KGB in Belarus. Now, our Balkans correspondent Pavel Chaskovsky is on the ground in the Moldovan capital of Chisinau with the latest. Good evening, Pavel. Now, what is the latest that you can tell us about this? I mean, how serious is the threat posed to Romania's national security by these alleged disclosures?
Well, Diana, according to Moldovan media, the wanted officer is Alexandru Balan, the former deputy head of Moldovan Security and Intelligence Services. And Balan was accused of working on behalf of Belarusian KGB, and his espionage operations were to endanger the security of Romania. And this is why, when he was arrested today at the Romanian airport, he was transferred to Bucharest, where he will await hearing. But one important thing to remember here is the fact that Balan is a Moldovan authority, and Moldova, a country between Ukraine and Romania, is under a lot of pressure and influence coming from Moscow. It was especially evident last year during the country's presidential elections and EU accession referendum, when the country was under a lot of cyber attacks, a lot of voting fraud actions carried out by people closely associated with the Kremlin. And right now Moldova is preparing to hold parliamentary elections that will be held on September the 28th, and authorities say that they already experience similar actions that are only bound to intensify as the date of the elections draws closer. Back to you.
And this is definitely a developing story. Thank you so much, Pavel Chaskovsky, coming to us live from Moldova. And in breaking news from France, the French government has collapsed after lawmakers held a critical vote of confidence in the National Assembly on Monday, toppling the cabinet of François Bayrou. He is the fourth prime minister in less than 2 years to lose his seat. Maciej Wilowski reports.
A political crisis, potentially one of the biggest in decades, is brewing in France. On Monday, sitting Prime Minister François Bayrou lost a critical vote of confidence in France's parliament, the National Assembly, toppling his government after just 9 months in power. He becomes the fourth prime minister in less than 2 years to lose his seat. The vote came as lawmakers rejected Bayrou's proposal to drastically cut spending in an effort to balance the budget. France has not had a balanced budget since 1974. The task of choosing the next prime minister, the fifth in just 20 months, now falls to French President Emmanuel Macron. Whoever becomes the next prime minister will face the difficult task of forming a new government and shoring up France's precarious public finances. Last year, France ran a budget deficit equal to 5.8% of GDP, almost double the 3% limit allowed under the European Council's excessive deficit procedure. This year's deficit is projected at 5.4% of GDP.
I think France is living above its standards, and we need to cut on public expenditures and probably the level of government servants that we have. If you compare to other countries in Europe, we have too much people working for the states, and we need to curb that.
France is one of Europe's most indebted countries, with a debt-to-GDP ratio of 114%.
I think that if we don't act now to reduce the public deficit, it could happen that in a few years, maybe 10 years, 15 years, we could be in a situation quite comparable to Greece, and with a real public debt crisis, which means that the investor worldwide doesn't trust the government anymore and doesn't want to lend money to the French government, which leads ultimately to a public debt crisis.
On September 12th, France faces a review of its sovereign debt from credit rating agency Fitch Ratings, with more reviews scheduled over the coming weeks. Political impasse and rising deficits could lead to a credit rating downgrade, which could jolt European financial markets and cause bond yields to spike. The ousting of a centrist appointed by Macron is a victory for hard left and hard right forces. Marine Le Pen's National Rally, which has been leading opinion polls for much of the past 2 years, could push for a new election. It would be the second election in 2 years after last year's snap election failed to resolve France's political gridlock.
Both the extreme left and the extreme right, which are very powerful in this hanged parliament, they want President Macron to be just blocked, trapped, cornered, and to force him to quit. Maybe the far right is a bit more interesting because they used to have a very social policy-oriented, and this is still the case. When you look at the campaigns, this is still the case. They are still promising a lot of money to a lot of people, the electorate mostly, and they say that they can fix the situation by giving us purchasing power to everyone, more or less.
National Rally could also give France its next president. Jordan Bardella, a rising star in the party and successor to Le Pen, is considered a likely frontrunner in the 2027 presidential race when Macron's second term expires. Regardless of who becomes the next prime minister, France could be in for its biggest political challenge in decades. For TVP World, I'm Maciej Wilowski.
On Sunday, the world witnessed a truly marvelous phenomenon, a blood moon. For just over 80 minutes, the celestial event captivated stargazers around the globe. Franciszek Pilis has a story.
Through the alignment of celestial bodies, the moon loses its usually white glow, making way for a crimson facade. A total lunar eclipse, also known as a blood moon, graces the skies approximately every 6 months during the full moon.
The moon enters the shadow of our planet. Earth refracts sunlight, and it's the red wavelength that is refracted onto the moon. If we were on the moon, we would see our Earth in a red halo. As the sun sets, it turns red with an orange glow. That orange light shines on the moon, and that's why the moon turns red.
From Asia through Africa to Europe, people watched as the moon's familiar silver glow shifted to an intimidating blood red. Even the west coast of the United States got a glimpse of the eclipse. The degree of redness depends on atmospheric conditions that vary with levels of air pollution, dust storms, wildfire smoke, and even volcanic ash.
Shorter wavelengths like blue and green are scattered, but longer wavelengths like orange and red pass through the atmosphere. They are not dispersed that much, and they reach the surface of the moon. You could say that the atmosphere acts as a light filter.
With stargazers across the Eastern Hemisphere capturing footage of an exceptionally blood-red moon, this latest eclipse could be described as one of the most picturesque astronomical phenomena of the year. For TVP World, Franciszek Pilis.
And now we're back to our main story this evening. 10 months on, Serbia's anti-government protests show no signs of ending, and police crackdowns intensify. The question is President Aleksandar Vučić trying to wait the movement out, or will his government be forced to offer new concessions? Joining me now to discuss is Ivana Stratner, Research Fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Ivana, so glad to have you here with us on World News Tonight on TVP World. Now let me get straight right into it. I mean, there seems to be really, as I just said, no end in sight for this political crisis that's been going on in Serbia for 10 months now. My question to you is, Ivana, what do you think explains these protesters' ability to actually sustain momentum for so long and to fight for their cause? And what can you tell us, I mean, in general about these latest round of protests?
So you're right. It has been 10 consecutive months where Serbian people are taking to the streets and fighting for democracy, fighting for their freedom, fighting for freedom and justice, as well as this is also an anti-corruption movement. So a lot of young people, they do not want to leave the country. They want to build their future there. And how can they build their future in a country that is highly corrupted and not even democracy anymore? So whoever tells you that such protests are going to stop anytime soon and that students are going to give up is sorely mistaken. Students are not going to give up. I read social media daily. I see the news. I see interviews. I see that young people in Serbia are fully committed to stop Serbia sliding into autocracy, and that's actually the key word here, because we see horrible attacks against free media, against people, against justice. Students in general, independent media is completely collapsing. And people are tired of this. They want to stop, because one thing that Serbian president is counting on is that students will eventually get tired and they will actually stop fighting. I don't see that coming anytime soon. And of course, as we already know and discussed multiple times, it's already started 10 months ago when a canopy collapsed and killed people. And that was largely due to corruption, which opened new problems over there.
You know, Ivana, you said many interesting things here, and you did mention much on corruption, and of course how President Vučić hopes that this can just settle, right, and mend away. But Ivana, I'm just going to invite you to listen to the latest of what President Vučić has said in his latest words.
They were helped by that European scum who came here to destroy our country. Go ruin your own countries. Don't try to ruin Serbia, you scum. You're not even scum, you're worse than that. That's all I have to say to you.
Ivana, what's your take on that? I mean, I see you shaking your head there. Are these protests beginning, do you think, to weaken Vučić's grip on power? I mean, it's really quite unbelievable that a president could actually really say something like that.
This is outrageous that the Serbian president repeatedly referred to the Green delegates as scum. And not only that, he also threatened to prosecute them, which is unacceptable for a country that is reportedly moving towards the EU, because President Vučić always liked to claim, how Serbia is in the European Union path. But his latest lash out tells you all you need to do about his real attention related to the EU. He loves EU money. As always, I like to emphasize that his pocket is in the EU, but his heart is in Moscow and Beijing, which means that he loves to receive the European Union money for his political survival through all those investments coming from the EU. But on the other hand, he's not aligned with the EU in terms of values. So let's also not forget that he just came back from meeting with leaders such as Putin. He had multiple meetings for the past few years with the Chinese leaders. So he's very much, aligned with autocratic governments. And I'm afraid that Serbia is becoming Belarus 2.0.
But I mean,
that is my
I keep looking at these images. I mean, we're seeing it right there on the screens, right? I mean, we're seeing these protesters, we're seeing these students calling for these changes, calling for these political reforms. They want change, and they have been able to, to stay out on the streets for so long. Is there any possibility that eventually the president is going to concede? And I mean, what is it going to take?
I All I can tell you as someone who has been following Serbia for a very long time, and this year marks the 25th anniversary of the end of the Milosevic regime. What Vučić is doing right now, going after students, using tear gas and everything, it just shows that that his regime is very fragile. He understands very well that the Serbian students are not going to stop anytime soon. When the collapse of his regime is going to happen, I really don't know. But all I can tell you is that even if he puts forward elections, we have to make sure that those elections are free and fair. My concern is that he might actually also resort to even more force against people, because he just used tear gas just a few days ago. And let's also not forget that the Serbian government also thanked Russia for providing the government with so-called information about protests, which tells you all you need to know how Moscow and Belgrade work together. And Russia already provided the regime preservation package to Belarusian leaders, so we should absolutely not allow Moscow to do something like that in Serbia. This will be a huge challenge for the EU, and I truly hope that if the EU is serious about democracy promotion, that they will take these things seriously. Because to put in the global context, the war in Ukraine is truly also about democracy versus autocracy. And Putin is rallying his allies in the West, trying to show that the West is a paper tiger.
Ivana, just for a little bit of time that we have left, I mean, you made a comparison there, of course, between Russia and between Serbia. A little how Russia kind of underestimated Ukraine, and they thought that they were able to take Kyiv in 3 days. Do you think that Vučić underestimated how far and how long these protests would actually last?
You're absolutely right. He thought at the early stage of the protest that the protests are going to end very soon, and he was sorely mistaken. And if he still believes that he will be able to stop people fighting for their rights, he is sorely mistaken, because people there are not going to stop anytime soon, because their future, they want to build future there. And you're just showing all those horrendous videos coming from Serbia. People are not going to tolerate that. So I truly, truly hope that there will be more democracy over there. But for that, also the EU should stop sending pathetic comments such as "we are gravely concerned." Instead, they should take action and to punish leaders in the region who are undermining democracy in Europe.
Thank you so much, Ivana Stradner, Research Fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, for breaking down the situation unfolding in Serbia for 10 months now. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
And that's all for this edition of World News Tonight here on TVP World. I'm Diana Skaya. Thanks for watching. But don't go away. Stay with us here on TVP World for more news, analysis, and exclusive features.